Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about finding the complex conjugate. Now before we talk about finding the complex conjugates, we need to first talk about what are complex numbers. Now remember, complex numbers are just a combination of both real and imaginary numbers, and it can be written in the form as a plus bi and a minus bi, where a is our real number and b is our imaginary number. Now, you also have to recall when you're finding the conjugate, what is the value of the square root of -1? So, if you've forgotten, let's write that. The square root of -1 equals I. So knowing this, let's go into our first problem. So the first problem is going to be, and we'll label it as number 1, 2i minus 15. So before we go ahead and find the conjugate, the complex conjugate, let's first put this in the correct format. So we want it in this format up here. So I'm just going to rearrange this. I'm going to write it as -15 plus 2i. Now recall that I comes from a square root. And we know that a square root is always going to be plus or minus. So knowing this, if we have a plus 2i, we also must have a negative 2i. So the complex conjugate here is simply just going to be -15 minus 2i. And that is it. Let's try another example. Let's try this one right here. 9 minus I. So example 2. 9 minus I. So we are in the correct form. Notice up here. Again, we know that I comes from a square root. So if we have a negative I, we must also have a positive. So the complex conjugate here is going to be 9 plus I. And that is it. And that is finding the complex conjugate. And really nothing to it. It really comes in handy though when you need to rationalize a denominator. And we'll get into that more in the videos to come. But for finding the complex conjugate, that's all it is to it.